Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. It is, of course, Monday and time for a warm-up drawing. Today we're going to be drawing some koala bears. Let's get started. And here we are at my standing drawing desk. Yes, coming off the weekend, let's do a little review. We've done some wombats. Did some wombats. Now we're going back, did some raccoons. We've done some bears. La 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 la. Hippopotami, hippopotamuses. Three-toed sloth, so on and so forth. If you want to watch any of these videos, just go back in the history and see all of these videos in their entirety. Drawing 3 drawings at a session. Elephants, river otters, doggies, so on and so forth. And then, of course, previous to this, we were in toned sketchbook paper. I had to segue over to this sketchbook because I ran out of the toned sketch paper, and then of course I found some more. But we're going to go ahead and stick with this particular sketchbook for now, just because I'm lazy and I don't want to switch back over. Okay, so koalas. Koalas are very fascinating creatures, as I mentioned in our previous session as I was doing wombats, and the fact that koalas have a lot of really interesting things that they do. And I had mentioned the whole how they feed their young, because they only eat from one particular type of tree. Of course, those of you who have been to school, taken biology or anything like that, anything to do with animals, and they have mentioned the said koala, they eat eucalyptus. Eucalyptus in its raw form is poison. It is poisonous. It is poisonous to koalas, believe it or not. And you're like, wait a minute, that's their primary food source. Yes, but they have a enzyme or something, that bacteria or something in their stomach that allows them to digest said poison, which is fascinating to me. I mean, how long did that take? Why did they land on something as a species that was detrimental to them? I just, sometimes my brain doesn't quite wrap around the whole concept of eating poison, but they make it work. And fascinating thing is the babies that they have, their young, are not born with that enzyme, and it has to be passed on from the mother to their young, which is, again, how do they do that? And that is by allowing the young to feed on the parent's poop. So the next time that your parents, if you are a youngster or if you're a parent, this would be a funny little little side commentary. If you're a parent, your kid complains about what they're eating that night. Oh, Mom, can we have McDonald's? I don't want to have delicious pot roast. I'm just not in the mood. You can always say, well, if you want, you can do what koalas do to their babies, and you can eat my poop. Oh yeah, dude, that was so funny. Yeah, I'm just being funny. No, don't feed your children feces. That is just gross. But it just goes to show you the diversity in animals. Whoops, let's go ahead and flip our light around. Now we can see the diversity in animals that happens. I don't know of any other cute creatures that the mom passes on their dookie. I'm sure that I could find it. But do I really want to Google that? do I really want to search out that information? I don't think so. So it is Monday here in the wonderful mountains of Appalachia. We have been going through an ice storm, which has really affected a lot of humans in our area, as well as in adjacent states such as Texas and Louisiana and Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky. But we haven't really had it that bad. We have not lost power, which is awesome. And about the only thing that I had to deal with was water coming in through my ceiling of my bedroom and onto my bed. Lovely. And those of you who live in the upper quadrants of our country can probably relate to this when you have freezing rain and low temperatures and you have that constant warming up, thawing, warming up, freezing of ice on your roof. That creates something called an ice dam. Something I had no clue what it was. Of course, my father-in-law, who is much wiser than I am, he lived in Alaska, and he understood a lot more with regards to that ice dam principle and roofs, because he came over and pretty much schooled me and said, yeah, that's basically what's happening, and you're getting water that pools on your roof, pools on the roof, and then it seeps into the shingles and goes into the seam where the angle goes down to a different angle, and that's just something that you're going to have to address. And I'm like, I just bought a new house. I don't want to address anything. But it's fine. We'll deal with it. That's what buckets are for. That's what insurance, if it had any damage, which I don't believe it did. I went up there and checked everything out. But yeah, ice dam. So you basically have to make sure that everything is draining properly off your roof when the weather changes. Yeah. So, as you see, Monday mornings are hard. That's because I have I did very little over the weekend in terms of drawing. I don't think I even came into my studio one time at all, which sometimes you need a break. That's another thing I want to mention. You know, I talk about drawing every day being that thing you do for yourself, but there is nothing wrong with taking a break. Sometimes breaks are needed, and I fully support that, because I had a very challenging Friday. Had a lot to do. Had an event on Friday evening that we had to get ready for, but I had a lot of sculpting on Friday, and that sculpting just takes it out of me. Sculpting, of course, being 3D sculpting, not a traditional sculptor. I do stuff 3D. And I just haven't completely worked out my workflow in the 3D program that I use, which is ZBrush. I've been using it for quite a while, but I'm still challenged in many areas, and when I have difficulties, I consult ZBrush website, and they have a lot of tutorials on there. So if you were kind of on the fence with regards to 3D, I definitely encourage you to branch out, especially if you're a designer of some capacity. 3D is just a wonderful thing to experience, and I definitely recommend it. Okay. So what I'm doing right now, again, is trying to just get that roadmap situated, and I go in and putting in simple shapes, your circle, simple placement for ears, and then I go back with a little bit of a harder line that helps define that form a little bit better. And looking between the lines, meaning I'm not getting into details too quickly, because I don't want to mire myself down in details and then suddenly look up and the form and the anatomy is incorrect. That's why you'll see me move around. I move around a lot, constantly correcting and trying to make sure that I do things that make sense. Hopefully you'll understand. Drawing is about choices, and sometimes we, again, get a little too frisky. I call it frisky, but it's basically impatience. And we want to get to the finish line quickly. And sometimes you need to understand that the finish line will come. You will get there. I've heard that phrase. It's not about the destination. It's about the journey. And I think there's a lot to that. That's a little philosophical, definitely. But you definitely want to make sure you enjoy the process, because you'll learn a lot from it. If that makes any sense at all, that would be a good thing. Okay, a little bit of shadowing here and there. Let's get a little bit of indication of eucalypti branches, trees, because he's hanging on a branch here. Let's go ahead and make sure we've got the anatomy correct here. Go ahead and do some shadowing underneath the eyes. Here and there. I did have the unique opportunity to sculpt a koala for a product that the company I work for manufactures, and of course that was a delight. I love 3D sculpting. It is a challenge for me, as I talked before, not just because of the process of understanding the sculpting concept of 3D, understanding height, width, and depth, and how things wrap around, and how textures and form, but also solving production challenges, manufacturing, and how, as a sculptor and a toy designer, I have to think about the manufacturing process and not just go off on a tangent and thinking everything can be manufactured, which it cannot. Of course, you think, well, wait a minute, everything can be, right? Well, there are so many factors whenever you design toys, not only one of the most important, which is viability, and that has to do with the manufacturing process, like creating something, having it be in a mold, having that tool, which is a metal form that you pour liquid into, and having it come out in the production cycle and for mass production. So it has to be for mass production. If I was creating things for a one-off, it'd be completely different than it would for mass production. And the really big mitigating factor is cost. Is that, can I make money on it? Or the company who is paying you, can they make money on it? Because the molds, and a lot of people don't know this, they call them tools, tooling. Like whenever iPhone is made, there's a tool involved that manufactures things or toys, and some of those tools can be in excess of $15,000-$20,000 just to make the mold for the stuff to be poured in. So if there's a mistake after the fact, then the tool needs to be modified. That's why there's so many safeguards in place. the tool needs to be modified or mold, it could cost, you have to cut a whole new mold. That is unbelievably expensive. $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 for one particular mold. Yeah, that's why it's important you get sign-offs and write-offs and everything else on everything you do. But yeah, 3D is rewarding, but also very challenging for sure. And I think for me, it really comes down to language and the software that I have to learn to create these models for collectibles. And this is Koala number 1. Moving on to Koala number 2. Koala's all about the number 2. No. Stop the madness. Stop the dad jokes. Stop them. Okay, fine. My wife is very, 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 very smart. And she's also very attuned to, quote unquote, as I use that phrase again, which I'm trying to get away from. I recognize that I was using it too much. Quote unquote, stop the madness. Anyway, very smart woman, and sometimes some of the jokes I make are a little too dad oriented, because she's not much younger than I am, but she still has that finger and that pulse on her youth. So whenever I do stuff like that, she's like, "Oh no, we're not doing that. That's a dad joke. Stop the dad dancing. Stop the dad jokes. Stop the madness." And I'm like, "What you talking about, baby? I'm just having fun." I kid. But she is very, very smart. And I'm very, very blessed to have her in my life. And no, she does not watch my channel. It's not that she's not interested in what I do. She is. But she doesn't really do social media or any type of YouTube situation. And she's never been that way, so that's completely fine. I don't begrudge her for that in any capacity. Actually, I'm trying to get away myself a little bit more from social media, because I recognize that spending 2 and 3 hours and 4 hours on your phone every single day is not very healthy, or at least it was not for me. So I made some changes here in 2026, and that is exactly what I endeavored to do. I talk about hobbies, and I've talked about this before, and how we as a people have kind of gotten away from that in lieu of our devices. Instead of finding new areas to improve in our lives, we sit down and we veg out. And that is not necessarily the best thing to do. And I recognize that, especially for me. I basically needed to make a change. And that's exactly what I did. This is part of that change. This whole, you guys have seen me start the day out. Even though I would draw, it wouldn't be in this capacity. I would do doodles. I would maybe do some line exercises. And I kind of really got too far away from my core. And that is drawing in general. So that's what this is. This is me getting back to the beginning. I've made this joke before. This is a Princess Bride reference. The Saint told me to go back. When I get lost, you go back to the beginning. And that is so true. So if you have found yourself, if you're an artist and you have found yourself that you're lost in your job and your career is kind of waning, I suggest you kind of invest a little bit in yourself. Meaning, get back to the basics. Get back. Just do as Vicini said, you go back to the beginning. And that's what I do. That, of course, is Inigo Montoya. After he went kind of off the rails and his entire world collapsed, and he had to go back to the thieves' village. And that's whenever his friend found him. And then he went to find the six-fingered man. If you have not watched Princess Bride in a while, I highly recommend it. I believe that is a Carl Reiner film. Unfortunately, Carl Reiner has left us due to very sad circumstances. But his body of work definitely is something that needs to be recognized. Curl of the mouth right here. We'll have the skin flap come around, and then we've got the darker shadow underneath that really accentuates the nose and mouth area. And we've got this little fur patch that comes down. Okay, then we come back. Yeah, go here and here and there and there and here. Foot. Let's go and do this front arm. Comes around. So whenever I'm doing stuff like this, again, I go here, I go there, I reference the nose. You see I go back to the nose a lot because I want to make sure this relationship between the eyes and the nose is somewhat correct. And then you'll see me come back and I'll put some shade and shadowing, and then maybe I'll draw a shadow shape here, and then I'll come up to the ear. It's all part of the shaping and getting the bigger picture perspective as it applies to what I'm drawing. I don't want to get mired down in one area and then forget something else. It's okay if you do simple things back here, because if you're really trying to put focus and contrast in this facial area, as you see the arms kind of point towards the face, and that is something that I definitely want to make sure and cover and get correct. Yeah. But yeah, you'll see me jump around quite a bit and try and make sure I get those areas shored up correctly before I move on to the details. Don't get mired down in the details too quickly, because then you'll realize, oh, I've just really worked myself into a hole or a corner, and then I suddenly don't really you fight it. It's almost like a fight. You're fighting yourself, you're fighting the drawing, you're fighting basically everything about the illustration drawing itself, and it becomes unenjoyable. Drawing to me is a release, and for some people it is drudgery. Drudgery. And I don't ever want to view drawing as something that is not enjoyable, because for me, it puts my brain at ease. It calms me down. And some people are like, it stresses me out. Well, you need to change. You have that paradigm shift. That shift and really saying to yourself, I'm going to have fun. Whenever I would teach kids, their concept of drawing is perfect. They want everything perfect. They want a perfect circle. They want perfect drawings. They want things to go perfect because they want to impress those that they're around. I would get kids, whenever I'm teaching, we're talking kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and teaching them principles is hard because they have a very short attention span. Again, being trained a certain way with devices. The attention span now of modern youth is probably less than 2 minutes, and you have to kind of, and that's horrendous. And you kind of have to steer them. It's like herding cats. But the whole concept of them wanting to do things perfect on the first try, I told him is wrong. I said, did you learn your bike on the first try? Well, no. Did you learn how to tie your shoes on the first try? Well, no. Why would drawing be any different? Drawing is hard. And I would tell them, drawing is hard for Mr. Mike. It's hard for me. And they would say, pfft. And they would always try to compare themselves with me, which I really hesitated to show them anything that I did, because again, there would be, I'm trying to aspire to be you. And I would always say, don't try to be Mr. Mike. I said, you try to be you. And I would always start out with an exercise of scribbles. And scribbles are wonderful. Just scribble, 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 circles, and just getting your arm free and getting that communication line open. And that really helps. And sometimes I'll just sit down and scribble. Nothing wrong with scribbles. At all. So definitely get your scribble on. Nothing wrong with some scribbles here and there. I remember I was at Disney and talking to some of the really industry professionals that have shaped our perception of art. I mean, those guys that worked on some of the animated features and Lilo and Stitch and Phineas and Ferb and Lion King and some of those other areas, really, they had a different perspective, because doing things for a company that has such a high standard, and you're being around like-minded individuals, it really helps. And talking to them and understanding a lot of them treated art as work. And that was probably not great, because work you leave at home, but art is with you all the time. And I'd ask some of them, do you draw outside of work? No. You don't draw anything for yourself? No. And this is coming from industry professionals that have been doing it a long time and just basically have lost that zeal for what they do. And I remember watching some of the old stuff being some of the, like the Nine Old Men, Ollie Johnson, Mark Davis, who is my favorite man, Renaissance man, could do pretty much anything. He had a robust home studio where he would explore what he did. And really, his painting life and stuff he did at home, and he'd do stuff all the time. And I think that's great. And there's nothing wrong with leaving work at home, or I'm sorry, leaving work at work, but you still should, at the very least, explore on your own. Develop as an artist, because companies will go away, jobs will go away, you'll get older, you'll be phased out. I mean, Disney does that a lot. They phase people out and they get new blood in because they're constantly changing, even though there might be value in that human. It's just time. That's the way they do it. And it is unfortunate, because if you're not continually developing and bringing new things to the table, then you are not being a creative, you are being a maintainer. And Disney is one of those companies that is a creative, and they're constantly pushing the envelope, and they need new blood, and that's kind of where they're at. Do I agree all the way? No. But I think that there is definitely a need to develop, and that's why we're doing stuff like this. So, let's go ahead and get a shadow here. Yeah. Animals, to me, give me insight into humanity. This planet is so diverse and rich in life. It is almost an endless palette, reference palette, for doing art. I mean, there's species, we haven't even gotten into the insects yet. We're not even scraping the surface. We're kind of overviewing and picking and choosing what animals we're going to draw. But definitely, if you want to learn, start with animals. And then if you want to move on to humans, draw humans from different areas. Draw humans from different cultures wearing different clothing that have different backgrounds. I definitely think that would help you. That would be really cool, wouldn't it? Yeah, this is culture. Culture's beautiful. Alright, this is numero 2, drawing koalas. Koala, of course, being a marsupial. They have a pouch where they're young. This is from Australia. Isn't it fascinating how that island has such a diverse amount of unique species that did not interact with other species, and you have stuff that only exists there. That's why that ecosystem is very fragile. And you can't allow invasive species onto the island, or else it would decimate and destroy existing species. So you got to be very careful. That's why Australia is a very unique place. Yeah. Moving on. Alrighty. Now, just because you're watching me do it a certain way, do it meaning the drawing, does not mean that is the only way. I think we I know people are really good imitators, and we try to do things similar to what we see. And there really isn't anything wrong with that, as long as you develop as you go. That means basically take what you get, take what you emulate, and then make your own way to do what makes sense for you. It's just like anything else in the world, right? Fashion is a really good example of that, because we have an entire industry that is built on what people want to look like for that particular day. And they emulate what they see in the marketplace, or what's on movies or something like that. Nowadays you have social media, TikTok, and some of those other areas that basically kind of is like a mishmash of our society, and we copy each other. We are emulators of each other. It's so funny whenever I look at some of the fashion styles from long ago, like 1800s and stuff like that, you're thinking to yourself, man, how in the heck did you function by wearing an entire outfit made of wool, and you're covered in black? You're completely covered. Well, at the time, those were the fashions. What is socially acceptable. Now, if you had somebody from now that showed up, I mean, if you just go on social media and people are half dressed, and could you imagine the scandal that would happen if you showed up I mean, golly, it's just, it's so fascinating. Of course, if you went back in Roman times, right? Roman times, and people were in togas and stuff like that, or whatever they were wearing. I don't know what they were wearing. And yeah, doing some of those things and realizing, wow, they don't have a lot of clothes on. What's just the way it was. But drawing is such that you kind of emulate what you see. So this, what you're seeing me do, this construction method, starting out with simple shapes, this works for me. Does it work for everybody? No, and that's what makes art really cool, because it is so subjective and everybody is different. Everybody does things different. I remember watching a tutorial on Photoshop, get this right here, and how you can learn so much from watching other people use a program. I've been using Photoshop for a long time, and I do have a couple of videos pertaining to that on my channel. We're going to get a little bit more in depth in that in the year 2026 and teach a little bit more about Photoshop, especially on the illustration side, because Photoshop is kind of like the Swiss Army knife. For those of you who don't know what that is a multi-tool. And Photoshop is really a multi-tool, and it can do so many things. And I encourage you, if you have not looked into digital illustration as an artist, you should. A lot of people thought that it was going to destroy the way we do things, and in one essence, it didn't destroy, it really, for me, accentuated, because it gave me new perspective on the fact that I love paper and pencil. Digital illustration, although good, especially for a professional, there is a disconnect. And I talk about this a lot, and that disconnect being something that is hard to get past, because you're having to learn a piece of software that kind of works against you in a lot of areas. Now, once you learn it, it is just like any other tool. Let's go ahead and draw this hand. It is like any other tool in your tool belt, and the better you learn to use the tool, the more apt you are at creating art with said tool. And just like any tool, it needs to be maintenance, so you have to learn to use the tool efficiently. But then there's ways that you can use the tool that were maybe unpredictable. You can use Photoshop for animation. You're like, what? Yes, you can. You can use it for animation, which is something I had done very briefly until I found TV Paint, which TV Paint is amazing. And yeah, you can use Photoshop for a myriad of different things. And I encourage you, if you don't know much about digital illustration, you're on the fence, make the commitment. Go for it. Try it out. I believe you can try certain programs out. Now Photoshop's expensive, don't get me wrong, it's expensive. It is a commitment, it's a big commitment. And if you're not ready to make commitment, then you can use emulators, Photoshop emulators, and that is something like GIMP or Medibang or some of those other softwares that maybe not as expensive. And a really good emulator, it's not really an emulator, it's kind of, in my opinion, in some ways, it really beats Photoshop, especially, but Photoshop is, like I said, a Swiss Army tool. It is a multi-tool. Let's get rid of the Swiss Army connotation. Some people don't like knives. A Swiss Army tool, not even Swiss Army, it is a multi-tool. And yeah, it can do a lot of things, but a program like Clip Studio Paint really kind of gears towards illustrators and artists, and you can do a lot of really cool things in Clip Studio Paint, and it's cheaper, or at least it used to be. I don't know what it is now. Everything's on a subscription now, and I really don't like that. I don't own any of my software. Now it's all subscription based, which I think is kind of crummy, because they get you on that subscription model. And even going so far as my printer. So my HP printer that I have is now on an ink subscription. I think it's $8.99 a month, which includes paper. I mean, all those things are great. But I found out the hard way. I was like, I'm tired of having that subscription. And I canceled it or suspended it. And then lo and behold, the ink cartridge that was in there, even though I had paid a fee, was part of a subscription. And what they did was, this is really, for those of you who don't know, they deactivated the ink cartridge in my printer. I couldn't print anything. And I was like, wait a minute. I paid a fee, and they reserve the right to deactivate your cartridge that you paid for in your printer because it was part of a subscription. And if you cancel that subscription, you can no longer access that printer cartridge. Could I buy other printer cartridges? Sure. But then I was like, so then I had to go back into the app because it's an app, and I had to reactivate the printer cartridge because it was part of a subscription. Everything that a lot of the stuff I use is subscription-based stuff, and that is kind of crummy. Now, granted, I can write stuff on taxes and stuff like that, so that's not really a issue. But it is crummy nowadays. I mean, how far are we off for the same thing happening with our automobiles? I think we're close. If you don't subscribe and pay some type of monthly fee, other than your car payment, they can reserve the right to deactivate your automobile if you decide to stop. That's why I'm looking. I have an older car that I'm kind of fixing up. It's been a very slow process because, married, work. And it's a 62 Ford Fairlane. And I've restored cars before. I've kind of talked very briefly about that on my channel and how it is important to recognize good design. Now, the Ford Fairlane's not very cool looking. It's kind of a family car. Most people are geared towards your Mustangs, 67 Mustang, 66 Mustang, somewhere around there, or your Camaros, or some of those muscle cars. And that's completely fine, but I look at some of the family cars, like your Fairlane, your Galaxy, maybe your Impala, some of those cars, and some of the really cool design cues that are in there. Like the Fairlane has these really cool taillights that look like, get this, they look like rocket engines. Because at the time in the 60s, it was what? It was the space race, and everything was about space. When you realize that 75% of the United States budget, that includes defense, was geared towards the space program and getting us to the moon, then you realize you had companies that would want to capitalize on that. And you see it in a myriad of places in design, which is really cool. Let me go ahead and do this. The fur kind of comes around here like that. He's leaning up against a tree. And yeah, you see that in appliances. They kind of have a rocket ship look to them, and that's really fascinating. I love good design. And the Ford Fairlane 62, you can look it up, has just a really interesting, got wings on it. And I'm like, really? And the best thing out of all of it is the car was given to me for free by an extremely generous human being that we rented from for a stint of time. Very rare person that you never, it's hard to meet people like that. And that's why I talk about Appalachian people being different and how their loyalty is earned. It's not given, it's earned. And how this particular person really blessed my family immensely. Not only charging us hardly anything in rent, but also blessing us with things and stuff. Not only did he allow us to save money for 4 years, he was very generous with his time and everything, all of his stuff, and gave me a car. And yeah, wonderful human being. You don't meet too many people like that in your life, and you want to foster and pay that forward to other human beings. And one part of that is drawing pictures like this for you guys. Yeah, an incredible person. So I'm looking forward in this year to really using some of the space that I paid for over here in the new shop and here at the new house, because I have a 2,200 square foot shop that I'll be doing some painting and welding and creating some stuff for the channel, as well as possibly starting an additional channel that has to do with car restoration. We will see how that pans out, because my job is very taxing on me and the family, because it takes a long time to do things, and adding another layer of commitment is sometimes very difficult. For those of you who don't know, YouTube takes a long time. So again, composition, perspective, anatomy, all of these things that I'm thinking about when I do this illustration and create these characters, not characters, create this piece of art. Yeah. There is a methodology to it. I just don't sit down and boom, stick these things out. You know what this is? This is my boomstick. Army of Darkness reference. Look it up. Very fascinating movie. Kind of like a comedy, but also zombies. Anyway, boomstick. Yeah. So, we're just putting some of these little elements in. Right now, I'm going to do some shadowing right here. Shadow shape. Come here. Another shadow shape right here. Cast shadow. Up here in the mountains currently it's very cold. Like I had mentioned, it's very cold here in the studio. I have to turn my fans on, my heaters on about an hour and a half before I come in here. Otherwise I would freeze. It's cold outside. We've had a lot of ice and slipperiness and ice storms and a lot of unpleasantness. I don't like extreme winter weather. Now, we have not had any snow. Actually, we did have some snow last night. But it's not, I mean, nothing worth even mentioning. It's not really anything worth mentioning. But the problem is our city is not really set up in the infrastructure for extreme weather. So when we have extreme weather like this, it does shut the town down. So a lot of stuff is closed today, schools, so on and so forth, because we have mountains and you can have buses that slide off of the mountain with kids in them. So we don't allow that to happen here in the city. Let's go ahead and do this shadow right here. So I always wondered how Koala slept. So that's what I'm dealing with today. Good thing that I have heat and electricity. That's always a bonus. Yeah. So part of the process of thought with regards to these illustrations and these sketches is finding that mid zone of where I need to stop. It is important, and this is something that you'll learn as you do artwork, is you can do a piece, you can really spend hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and really get into the details, but there is a point where it is finished, not perfect. And that is a zone where I like to be. I like the roughness. I like showing some of the construction lines. Now, you could argue, spend more time on it, get it finished. My process of thought is, that's not what this is about. This is a teaching tool. It's here to show you process. And then if you want to continue on, then you are more than welcome. But for me and my house, we will let it lie here. And use this as an ending point for you guys to hopefully like and subscribe if you like what you see. Enjoy the process of these videos and definitely stick around. We're going to have more coming, hopefully 3 a day, until I get tired of it, or until I segue next month to, are you ready? Maybe some Disney characters. I have not decided if I'm doing that yet. 3 Disney characters or 3 poses of a Disney character a day? Man, and yes, I did do Disney characters when I worked at Disney. I had the unique opportunity to work on the Fab Five, as well as a new iteration of Mickey Mouse, which was Mickey Edge. What a wonderful experience that was. So let me know if you want me to do the Disney characters, because I'm perfectly happy with doing animals. I love animals, and it's kind of my jam. If I start injecting some character work in there, it'll probably get me more views. But how will that benefit you and me in the long run? I already know I can draw Disney characters. I'm not doing it for my benefit. But let me know in the comments below. And we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one, guys. Bye.